Well, thank you for coming. And the agony and the ecstasy. Anybody remember where that was used originally?
Wide World of Sports.
Exactly right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And the agony of defeat. That was a great opening line. And it just struck me that Red Sox fans have had their share of agony. And more recently, we've had a lot of ecstasy. 4 World Championships, 2004 through 2018. Somebody identify what this is a picture of? Does it jump right off the screen? Did anybody?
The first one we won?
No, it's actually the most recent one.
Oh.
That's Dodger Stadium. They've just won Game 5. They're now the world champions. And as you can see, this is more the ecstasy.
Yes. This is very nice. I like your picture.
So I'm going to take you way, way back to the beginning. And I think
Pull the chair out if you can see.
Want me to move on?
Jack Hutchinson was around when they started
from there?
making in 1903.
Can't come back out.
Let's pull the chairs, out.
Just get covered.
Can you see?
This is so exciting.
Good
We had
seats.
to be here.
These are all box seats we have.
Hey.
Yeah, right. No peanuts, no popcorn, no beer, of course. Now, Jack Hutchinson was actually at this 1903 game. If you look close, I'm kidding. Jack's so good-natured, he doesn't mind. But the Red Sox were actually founded in 1901. That's when they were created. And at that point, the team that later became the Boston Braves had actually been playing for 30 seasons. But the American League started to compete with the National League. And about half of the Boston Braves, at that point they were the Bean Eaters, joined the Red Sox. And the Red Sox were immediately successful, and the Bean Eaters, even after all those years, took second place to the Red Sox. Now, this is Huntington Ave grounds. Most of you know where Northeastern is?
Yeah.
University, yeah. It was right smack on the campus where you see the big field house, the big gymnasium. And that was the site of the Huntington Ave grounds. The Braves, Bean Eaters, were actually playing on the other side of the railroad tracks. They were from the wrong side of the track as it turned out. But the big difference was that the Bean Eaters charged $1 and the Red Sox, as a new team, charged 50 cents. So that was a big advantage.
You can't afford it
in
now.
those days. This is the Boston Opera House. Yeah, got torn down and put up a parking lot, as Joni Mitchell told us. And when it was full, there were 12,000 people here. And the very first World Series, the Red Sox versus Pittsburgh Pirates, was played right here in Boston, right at the Huntington Ave ground. And this is actually a picture from the World Series. And we know that because there are 2 umpires. You can see the first base umpire, and you can see the home plate umpire. During the regular season, they had 1 umpire. So there's a lot of cutting across from first to third when his back was turned. But they really got sophisticated and put 2 umpires, one from National League, one from American League. And the one from the American League was Tom Conley, who lived in Natick, about a quarter of a mile from where I live. And he was the very first American League umpire. On the first day, he umpired a game, and the other 3 games were rained out. So literally, it was the very first. And in fact, he's in the Hall of Fame. Not a lot of umpires in the Hall of Fame. But he then went on to umpire another 50 years, first umpire in chief. So the Red Sox, much to the surprise of the Pittsburgh Pirates, think about it, Red Sox only existed for 3 years. The Pirates, as a franchise, been around for about 30 years. And, you know, it was most like the old NFL, AFL. I think probably a lot of you, was that sort of thing, you know. The American League was like the AFL. They thought it was going to be a pretty easy victory. But in fact, the Red Sox won that first series, 5-3. They played 9 games for a couple of years and then realized that that was too much and went to the 7-game format. The following year, the Red Sox again won the American League pennant, but the New York Giants refused to play them in the World Series. You know, I think they were afraid. You know, pretty embarrassing to lose to a brand new team. So there was one year off, and then of course there was not another year off until regrettably 1994. The season ended prematurely. So going back to 1903, this being the first one, it's been a World Series every year except for 2, 1904 and unfortunately 2014. And so they played there in the Huntington Yard. The Red Sox played there for 12 years. And it was a much nicer stadium than the Braves. Then in 1912, we have America's most beloved ballpark, or at least that's what they say when they introduce, you know, the beginning of the game. I'm not so sure the people in Chicago agree with that. I don't know if there's been a national referendum and we won, but you know, it's good for marketing, and the Red Sox are very good at marketing as well. So here we are, the very first year of Fenway Park, the Red Sox won the American League pennant, and it was so successful, they actually built bleacher seats further up. This is the pavilion.
Oh, yeah.
This is the grandstand. Then further out is the bleachers. And when it opened, it seated 25,000 people. And then for the World Series, they put in more seating. And so, in fact, they could get over 30,000. So it was state of art, the first stadium built with concrete and steel. And there was a problem. They were all built of wood, so they all eventually burned down. It was just a matter of time. So this opened in 1912. Red Sox won this World Series. And can you see the little indentation or space there? The grandstands ended here, and there's a big, big alleyway. When Tom Yawkey bought the team and renovated, moved the grandstands down. And so my seats are actually here, and we're about 1.5 feet above the people to our left. So we actually have a better view, and they're paying twice as much, so we kind of keep that quiet. But, you know, the actual footprint that you see in here from 1912 is still the footprint of what's there. Tom Yawkey really rebuilt the park in a lot of ways, and totally renovated, brought it up to date. So we'll go ahead. The Red Sox won in 1915, 16, and 18. At this point, there've actually been 15 World Series. The Red Sox have won 5 of them. They're undefeated in the World Series. And the Miracle Braves, the 1914 Boston Braves, won the National League pennant in the World Series. So Boston truly was the hub of professional baseball. It was all about Boston for all those years, 6 of the first 15. And that's about to change. And we'll skip pretty rapidly from 1918 to 1946. Who can find Babe Ruth for me in here?
The 4th on the left. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, 5.
Yeah, well, 5, we're counting here.
Stop.
Yeah.
He's obviously the biggest guy. And as I think most of you know, he started out as a pitcher. And he was a very, very good pitcher. There's no question if he had just stayed pitching that he would have gone to the Hall of Fame as a pitcher. But, you know, he really reinvented the game in the sense that up until Ruth's coming around, it was called the dead ball era. They play with the same ball the whole game, and nobody hit a home run. Or if they hit a home run, it was an inside the park home run. The fences were way back, and in fact, Home Run Baker led the American League with 12 home runs. So that gives you an idea of how different. And all of a sudden, Babe Ruth hits 29. And the next year, he hits 54. And it happens to coincide with the Black Sox scandal in 1919. And so baseball hit kind of a low point, because they've been gambling forever. They've been gambling from 1871 when the Braves started, right through 1919. In fact, there are gamblers still sitting in Fenway Park in 1966, out by the Fenway pole.
Grace has a question.
Yeah.
Is it true that Babe Ruth's piano was involved in Sudbury?
Supposedly it is. I don't know. Anybody who can verify that Babe Ruth's piano is in the pond in Sudbury? But he did live there in the off season, and for a number of years, and ultimately he got divorced and ended up in New York. But people were so down in baseball, all of a sudden this new thing, the home run into the stands, is come along. And so people were fascinated by that. So you could make a case that he really saved baseball, because people were really getting disillusioned about, they kind of figured every game was fixed if you could fix the World Series. But Babe Ruth took their eyes and mind off of that, and they focused on this new phenomena, the home run. So here we are in 1918, Boston is the capital, and then from 1918 to 1946, there really wasn't much to cheer about. Probably about the only good thing that happened was Yawkey buying the team in 1933. The ballpark was falling apart. The grandstand along the third baseline burned down. They didn't bother to do anything, just left it there. Now, when Yawkey came in, he totally rebuilt. And he's rebuilding this in 1934, and you can imagine how pleased everybody was, because there weren't any jobs. This was the biggest project going on in Boston. In fact, they did it once, it burned down, and they did it again. I think it was a friendly fire, but I guess we'll never know. So Tom Yawkey became beloved from the very beginning of somebody who was providing jobs. So we're going to skip all the way from 1918 to 1946. And here we have the teammates, obviously Ted Williams, you all know him. Bobby Dua, who's number one up on the right field facade. That was his unit. And his Dominic DiMaggio, who was Joe's younger brother. And when I interviewed him, he said, I used to tell people, he's my brother too. And I'm an all-star. Now, there was only one Joe DiMaggio. He recognized that, but he felt like he played second fiddle too much, really. And he was a very, very good player. So the one teammate who's missing is Johnny Pesky. And he just was not in the dugout, I guess, at the time. It's a great, great picture. Pesky was the kid. He was the youngest of them all. And I remember asking Bobby too, how long have you known Johnny Pesky? And he goes, let's see. Johnny was a clubhouse boy in Portland, Oregon, when I was playing for San Francisco. And I was 19, so he was about 14. So he said, I guess I've known him 75 years, something like that.
Wow.
But all four of them, when you put Pesky in there, grew up and played in the West Coast. They all played in the Pacific Coast League. And eventually, teams in those days purchased a contract. They would say to the San Francisco Seals owner, we'll give you $50,000 for Don DiMaggio. They didn't have a minor league system that we know today, where the teams controlling the up and down. So all four of them knew one another, from the Pacific Coast League. And it's kind of amazing that they were the heart and soul of the ball club, these four guys who played against one another as youngsters. And from 1946 to 1950, the Red Sox were considered maybe the second or third best team in all of baseball. Unfortunately, the number one team was the New York Yankees. And it was very frustrating. The Red Sox had come close. Obviously, they won in 46 and played the St. Louis Cardinals and lost in 7 games. And you're going to see that becomes kind of a pattern over the next 40 years or so. But, and I was saying before we get going formally, Ted Williams played an exhibition game because the Red Sox had to practice while the Cardinals played the Brooklyn Dodgers in a playoff. And so they had an exhibition game, and Ted got hit in his left wrist by a pitch. But yeah, never said that's the reason I didn't do as well as I might have done. Yeah, according to legend, Pesky held the ball. Enos Slaughter scored from first base on a single. Well, number one, it was a double. Number two, I said to Bobby Doerr, did he hold the ball? He said, absolutely not. I was the closest one to him in the ballpark. And he caught it and he had to turn. So some people saw that as hesitation. The other problem was now we'd watch the video about 20 times. In those days it happened and that was it. And somebody said, he held the ball. Really? You sure? If you ever look at the movie, and they do have the footage, it does not seem he was really holding the ball. It was just now, Dorman pulled a hamstring, and he said, if I had been in center field, Slaughter never would have scored. They put in a replacement hoop. There was only one Dom DiMaggio in center field. So they were pretty adamant that no, Johnny Pesky did. Pesky was so humble, he said, yeah, I guess maybe I did. You know, that was the kind of guy he was, right up until the very end. Wonderful guy, really a wonderful guy. Now, for many of us, this is our favorite team. I raised my hand. 1967, by then we were pretty sure they were never going to ever win a world championship, or even a pennant, really. When they went to spring training in 67, the odds were 100 to 1 that they were even going to get to the World Series. And, you know, they just kept winning, and it was a year where there were 4 good teams. They went right down to the wire, almost a 4-way tie. The Red Sox won at the very end. Played St. Louis again. There's a pattern, as you see. They lost in 7 games. The picture isn't a great quality picture, but I like it for a lot of reasons. One, number 23 is manager Dick Williams' son. And in the summer, for part of the year, he was a bad boy. And Ricky actually grew up to be a coach in professional baseball. So there we have Ricky. Number 2 is Mike Andrews. And a lot of you might know him as the fellow who really ran the Jimmy Fund for probably about 40 years. Terrific guy. He's still doing well. And this is the man they call Yes. Anybody know the song? We all go, oh, you struck me. Oh, you struck me. I guess I'm the only one. So, whenever I would interview, and I've had the good fortune to interview about 150 former Red Sox players. Whenever I would interview somebody like a Don Zimmer or a Ralph Houk, baseball lifers, I'd say to them, have you ever seen anybody have a better year than the Avs did in 1967?
Yes.
And they always say the same thing, not when every game counted. He was like no one before or after. And Jack remembers as well as I. It was magical. Couldn't believe what was happening. And to this day, it's still probably. Well, this is they talk about Red Sox being a national team, Red Sox Nation. This is a team that saved baseball in Boston for the Red Sox. The year before, they had averaged about 10,000 fans, or 800,000 fans showed up. And this year, they drew 1,700,000, about 20,000 plus. And by the end of the year, when people realized it was for real, then they were selling out every game. So that's the Avs. That's Mike Ryan, who actually is from Haverhill, and was one of the catchers. He had a bunch of catches. And that's Joe Foy, who, as you can see, has just hit a home run, and he was the third baseman to start the year. So Jim Longboard won the last game of the regular season. He then went on to win Game 2 of the World Series with a one-hitter. And he went on to win Game 5 to keep hopes alive. He had pitched 3 of the most important games in Red Sox history and 3 of the best pitched games ever. And he started on two days of rest. He started Game 7. And he said, yeah, I just ran out of gas about the 5th inning. And in fact, Dick Williams came out and he was going to take him out, and Jim said, no. And then they got 3 more runs. The game was out of sight. He said, you know, I wish it had been different. And I said, what if you had 3 days rest? He said, well, Bob Gibson would have hit an extra day of rest too. And they weren't about to hit Bob Gibson. So now we're going to skip ahead to 1975. And so there's an 8-year gap before they win the pennant and actually win some postseason games. 67, the last time we'll ever see a Red Sox team or any other team win on the regular season, go directly to the World Series. Now there's a whole series of playoff games. The last year, that was 1968. So that last game of the year where they carried Longboard off the field on their shoulders, that we'll never see that again. You'll never see that kind of drama. Now along comes 1975, and they had pretty good teams in the early 70s. Dwight Evans came up, Louis Tiant came along, and they had some good teams. And all of a sudden, these 2 guys showed up at spring training. Fred Lynn on the far left, and Jim Rice, again having a handshake after a home run. That's Rick Burleson, the Rooster. Some of you probably remember Rick Burleson. But Jim had Rice. And they had rookie seasons like nobody else had ever had before. And ironically, up until until late August, they really had almost the same numbers, hitting 320 with 30-something home runs, headed to 100 RBI. And then Jim Rice got hit in the wrist, and he ended up missing the rest of the season and missing the entire World Series. And when you talk to these guys, they say, in '67, if Tony Canigliaro hadn't gotten hurt and he was our cleanup hitter, we would have won. And then they say in '75, Jim Rice doesn't get hurt, we would have won the '75 World Series. So jumping ahead, they played Cincinnati Reds 1975 World Series and lose in 7 games. And a lot of you, I think, will remember Game 6. That's a game where Pudge Fisk hit the home run off the foul pole, which really ought to be the fair pole. And he's waving the ball. He's using his body language to keep the ball fair. And so, some people felt the Red Sox actually won 3 games to 4 because that was more exciting than the Reds' victory the next night. Bill Lee famously threw an ephus pitch. There's a pitch that goes 20 feet in the air and then comes down, and you hardly ever see that. But Bill Lee did things hardly anybody'd seen before as well. I said, why did you throw that pitch? He said, what was I supposed to do? Throw him a 78-mile-an-hour fastball? I pitched, 300 innings at that point. That's about all I had left. And Perez hit it over the Charles River and still bouncing north of Boston. So I interviewed, I bet a lot of you remember Hawk Harrelson. He was the right fielder in the World Series for that '67 team. And we got talking about the two of them, and I said, you've been around baseball 60 years. Ever seen any two rookies of that caliber? He said, absolutely not. They were the two best by far. And so I said, what would be in second place? And neither one of us could even come up with a nomination. A pair of rookies who had an impact even comparing to what they did. And Fred Lynn went on to win the Triple Crown, and he was the Rookie of the Year and the most valuable player. First time ever been done. Really the only time it's been done by a genuine rookie. And I don't know if we'll ever see it again. But you say those things about baseball, and sure enough, something happened. It's like, I never thought anybody'd break Lou Gehrig's record. And Ripken broke it by about 300 games. How do you do that? How do you show up every day for 15 years? He must have had a headache one day. So now we're going to jump ahead to the 1986 World Series team. And they're the least happy of the whole crowd. And there's Bill Buckner there. And they hated the fact that he became the scapegoat. Hated it. Bob Stanley, who was the ace relief pitcher, said, I was on the mound. I could have gotten the Mets out. We would have won the World Championship. I didn't get it done. If you need a scapegoat, look at me. And Dwight Evans told me, he said, we left 14 men on base. You don't win a World Championship leaving 14 men on base. We'd even got two of them in. There would have been a 3-run lead, and Buckner's little fumble.
Why didn't he put Dave Stapleton in?
Where did that question come from?
Right here.
Oh, okay. Well, John McNamara, who was a baseball lifer, much to everybody's surprise, said, I felt he belonged out there when we won the World Championship. So he did it based on sentiment. And obviously was the wrong decision. What she's suggesting is, in the earlier games, whenever they got to the late innings, they replaced Buckner at first base with Dave Stapleton, who was a pretty good fielder. And by this time, Buckner's worn out just about every body part. I got to know Rich Gedman quite well. He grew up in Worcester and was the all-star catcher. And he said, we'd be in the clubhouse and we'd be looking over. And Buckner would take an hour wrapping tape over all this problem. And we all said, how does he play? How does he even play? So their perspective of Bill Buckner is very, very different, as you might imagine. He was kind of a tough interview for me. We got to the bobble, and I said, too much has already been printed, too many pictures have been shown, but if we don't at least talk about it briefly, the article won't have any credibility. He said, well, let's start and see how it goes. Whoa, no pressure here. In fact, I had to talk to his wife before he would agree to the interview, about a week early. She just wanted to know I was a good guy and the Red Sox connection. So he said, in all my years, I didn't make many errors. When I did, it usually wasn't on a ground ball. He said, I bent over, the ball went bounce, bounce, bounce. It didn't bounce, it skipped between his legs. There you go. And again, quoting, Dwight Evans, they scored 2 more runs, who cares? Everybody would have had a good chuckle about it. So there you go. Wade Boggs was on that team. He went to the Hall of Fame. To his right is Dwight Evans, you can see with the mustache. So that's Walter Riniak, who was the batting coach. And, I usually get to go to the reunions. 25 years, 40 years, they all have them all back. And at least, go into the room for an hour or so. And everybody's all the teams, really in a good. This team's a little more somber, They really had to carry that a long time. And, you know, the agony and the ecstasy, those of you with a really good memory will remember they came back from the grave in the series against the Anaheim Angels. The Angels had the police on horseback ringing the field to celebrate beating the Red Sox. And then the guys said in the dugout, we were all saying, okay, too soon. We're not ready to let this season end. And one by one, they came through and made it happen. Lou Gordon told me he went up to get Mrs. Yockey so he could get her out of there before the whole place went crazy. And he said, so we're walking up the stand. We both had our back turned, and all of a sudden the ballpark went silent. And we're like, wait, what just happened? And they realized Dave Henderson had hit a home run. Put the red. So they had quite a burden to carry. Most unfortunate, but then all worth the wait because 18 years later, along come the world champion Reds, and not just the world champion, but the team that was losing 3-0 against the Yankees. Everybody counted them out. Kevin Millar said in batting practice, you guys better win tonight, because if you don't, we're coming for you. We're going to be in the driver's seat. And I've interviewed about 15 players from that team. And everybody has a different memory of the clubhouse before the game. You know, some of it, remember, nobody said a word. It was so serious. Somebody else said, I was reading my magazine. But I think the most exciting one, Ramirez and Martinez and Orlando Cabrera were in the back room because Pedro's sister had made a goat dinner, which is a great delicacy for the Dominicans. And so they were more worried about the goat than they were about the Yankees. But they remarkably did come back, and you know, and that's something we'll all remember. You know, so finally, after 86 years, they win the World Championship. But what a way to win it, to be able to come back from the Yankees. Yankee fans are still shaking their head. How could that happen? Yeah, and when I first saw these pictures, I thought it was a little whatever. But then I met a daughter of a dear friend of mine who had died. She said, next day I went to the cemetery and I read the game stories to Dad. It meant something to these people. Yeah. And you can imagine when the Cubs finally won, how many people were hanging around cemeteries with balloons. Because that happened a little bit later. And this is interesting, that's Derek Lowe. And Derek was the winning pitcher in the Division Series game, last game. He was the winning pitcher in Game 7 of the Championship Series against the Yankees. And he's just become the winning pitcher in the championship game for the World Series. So he had a hat trick. And that's another thing you say, that's never going to happen again. It probably will. But the odds of somebody being in a position to be the winning pitcher for the deciding games is pretty unusual. And he was a free agent at the end of the year. And he told me that all year he had a terrible regular season, terrible. And he said, I was a loosey-goosey guy, threw the ball. But that year, all I could think about was, I've got to be great so I can make a lot of money. He said, I was altogether different pitcher. Eventually, they sent him to the bullpen. And Crehan called him in on the eve of the first playoff game. And he said, Derek, we're going to send you to the bullpen. You're not going to be a starter. He said, oh, no, that's not a problem, because I'm going home. And Crehan said, you might want to sleep on that, Derek. Give that a little more thought. And so, he went from the outhouse to the penthouse, if you'll excuse it. Here he is, he's being carried off the hill. And he got a huge contract. He ended up making over $100 million. Most of it from the Dodgers, but, well, about the same amount. The Dodgers paid him $45 million, and the Braves paid him $50 million. Red Sox hadn't actually paid him much because he wasn't. So he's enjoying his retirement. Let's just put it like that. He's a fun guy, very interesting guy. I mean, I've enjoyed every interview because, I'm really just a fan. Jack can verify that. I'm just a fan who decided I wanted to write about baseball. I ended up getting to meet all these guys that, I never thought I'd even be next to them, let alone talking to them for an hour. So, enjoying it. Derek Lowe had a man cave like nothing you've ever seen before. And when I've been able to interview them in their home, that's obviously more interesting. I end up doing about half of them on the phone, and not only is it not as much fun, but it's harder because you can't see how they're reacting to the question. If you're sitting with them and you watch the body language, you go, okay, let's go to a different subject in your mind. But you don't know on the telephone. So finally, there we are. This is a
Who was the
2000.
catcher?
Who was the catcher?
Who was the catcher 2004 that he's?
Jason Veritek.
Oh, Veritek.
Yeah,
No kidding.
yeah. He's the guy who stood up. He was on the world champion Little League team, world champion college baseball team, and the world champion Major League. Nobody else did it. Nobody else will do that again. Well, maybe next year. But Jason was the kind of the glue, and he stood up before the game 4 that everybody has a different memory of and said, "Okay, we're going to win this one inning at a time. We're going to hold them scoreless in the top of the first. We're going to scratch out a run in the first, and we will have won that inning." So, made the mountain climbable as opposed to, oh my God, how are we going to win 4 straight games? Let's win it inning by inning.
Is he still with the Sox, my friend? wants to know.
Yes. Jason Veritek is a special consultant. And last year he spent a lot of time in the dugout going over the analytic information and working with the catchers, helping the catchers. A lot of people feel he'll be a manager eventually, and I was very, very impressed with him. I spent about an hour with him, and very, very smart guy. So he was a catcher in 2004, 2007. He had a nice career. So now we fast forward to 2007, World Series against the Colorado Rockies. The only time the Colorado Rockies had ever been in the World Series. And Dustin Pedroia was the first hitter for the Red Sox in Game 1 of the World Series. Dustin Pedroia hit a home run over the Green Monster. And that was it. There's no way the Rockies were gonna beat us. He really set the tone. It wasn't even close. And the other part of the story is when they got to Colorado, Dustin's about my size. He's just a low guy. And when they get to Colorado, the clubhouse people didn't think he was a ball player. And so Derek said, "Why don't you go ask Jeff Francis if he knows who Dustin Pedroia is? I think he remembers me." So he was a Rookie of the Year, and the next year he was the most valuable player. So he got off to a great start. Like a lot of overachievers, when they get hurt, they kind of go down the slippery slope a little faster. 5-tool player gets hurt, well, he still got 4, and the 5th probably is okay. But another good example, Kevin Youkilis. He was a real grind-em-out overachiever, and he got hurt, and pretty quickly it was like, whoa, where you go? So they won this 4 straight games. So now they've been in 2 World Series in 4 years. and they've yet to lose a World Series game because they swept the Cardinals in the first in 2004. So now they're 8-0 in World Series games. And now we're going to fast forward to 2013, and in a lot of ways, this is a very underappreciated team. A lot of us think of them as the improbable dream because, similar to the '67 Red Sox, nobody thought. Some of you remember 2012 was one of the worst years they ever had. Bobby Valentine was the manager, and Poppy pulled his Achilles, and it just went on and on. Johnny Pesky died at the end. It was just dreadful. And all of a sudden, this team becomes formidable. And the key was, on Patriots Day, they were on their bus headed to the airport right after the bomber and the tragedy. And, I interviewed, that's Johnny Gold, I interviewed him, Dempster was a pitcher. I interviewed 4 of them, they all said, they were older guys, they were like 30, 32, and they all had kids. They said, we identified, we knew how awful it must have been. And a lot of you remember their first game in Cleveland, they hung up a Red Sox jersey with the number 617. Yeah. And they really adopted the cause. And Joe Castiglione, I think most of you know, he's the radio announcer, has been for forever. And he said, professional teams are like mercenaries. They come into the city, they shake hands, they do well, they go home. And he said, this team was different. He said, they would go hospital visits, that sort of thing, and insist that there was no publicity at all. And when I finished interviewing Ryan Dempster, who was a pitcher, he said, I want to thank the people of Boston for giving us the opportunity to do that. We really, really felt good about it. And, you just had the feeling that they weren't going to lose. It had been that kind of year. St. Louis actually got up, and it looked kind of doubtful. But let's see if we can. I don't think I have a picture. Now we'll go back. Game 6 of the World Series. When the series started, I said to my wife, you can go to any game you want. You decide. You want to go to the first game, there's a reception. She said, well, which game will I win the World Championship in? I said, that'll be Game 6. What do I know? And so she and I are there in Game 6. And it's the only time they've won the World Championship at home since 1918. We've had 4, the other 3 are all on the road. And it was an experience like no other. The only time I ever remember walking into Fenway and sensing that everybody believed they were going to win. Nobody thought they were going to. Nobody. And, I've always thought they might lose. and they opened, it was Game 6, and in the series they always have some hoopla. And they opened by putting a platform over home plate, and the drop kick, Murphy's playing, and Irish step dances come up. Now, everybody in Boston, one time or another, has seen or heard, knows about Irish, but you can see the Cardinals players, they're looking over the rail, like, what the hell is this? And everybody in the stadium is up and singing and cheering. I mean, it was absolutely the ideal way to set the tone. And it was just a great feeling. We hung around for a couple hours. You didn't want to leave, one of those things. So that's Johnny Gomes at the finish line of the marathon, and that's the World Series trophy. And there's the 617 that I referenced. So now we get closer to home, and it's 2018, and that team went beginning to end up front. 108 wins, the most in the history of the Red Sox, and a lot in the history of baseball. And Alex Cora, the rookie manager, was just the right guy at the right time and identified with the players. And being a Spanish speaker was very helpful. You can chew out the Spanish players in Spanish, and most people don't know what you just said. I used to go down to Puerto Rico to see Winterball. I got to meet Alex, way back. And then I interviewed him before the playoffs in 2008, because he had been a utility player in 2007 when they won the World Championship. And so I interviewed him, and he said, the thing that's surprising, everybody says how difficult it is to repeat. Everybody wants to beat you. He said, I had no idea how difficult it is. Because every city you go into, even if they have an lousy year, the papers and media are all, okay, maybe we can sweep those damn Red Sox and show them, we're pretty good. He said it was incredible how much people wanted to beat him. They beat him enough they didn't go back to the World Series stuff. There you have it. But he was very, very impressive. You could tell he was managerial potential. His big brother Joey was about 10 years older, and the father died when Alex was about 13, and Joey kind of took over as the father. And so Joey's playing winter ball, and every day after school, Alex runs down to the clubhouse, and gets the tape and does errands. So he spent his whole life around. He was a baseball lifer at age 25. So there he is with the trophy, and the reference is he was not voted the manager of the year. And actually, those awards are given out at the end of the regular season. And the theory is there are lots of awards given up in the World Series, so let's reward those 162 games, a marathon. So I'm still upset that they traded Mookie Betts.
I know.
You think back over the years, I saw Ted Williams, he's in the Hall of Fame. I watched Yaz from beginning to end, and I saw Wade Boggs. And I saw Jim Rice from beginning to end. You don't see many Hall of Fame players. And if he doesn't get injured, he's going to the Hall of Fame. And they said they couldn't afford him. Well, yeah, okay, good. That's Andrew Benintendi, giving him the old elbow. Now with Kansas City. Betts stole 30 bases and Andrew scored stole 21. A little piece of the game they lost when the two of them got away. And so now Mookie has been on a world championship team twice in 4 years, and not everybody can say that, so good for him, good for him. Okay, now what? So now I'll turn it over to you. How many people think they will make it to the World Series?
We might as well go for it.
Yeah, right.
We might as well
There's no
raise our
money.
hands.
I'll collect the money at the end.
If we lose, who knows, They don't know who was in this room.
That's a good attitude. But that's with your heart. Now I'd like to hear from your head.
Oh, yeah, well.
Yeah, they don't have a chance.
Oh, you think no? Why is that? I mean, I've known nothing about the Red Sox, so anything you say will be 20 times better than me, but why do you say there's no chance?
I was being somewhat facetious.
Oh, okay.
I said that last year, and they put together a much better season than I expected. I thought they were going to be terrible. So, it's hard to know. And as I said earlier, before the 2013 season, nobody thought they'd do anything, and they won the World Championship. So, and things happen. Players get hurt, And
It all depends on the pitching.
It's all about the pitching. That's an excellent point, because in 2004, 7, 13, and 18, the one thing they have in common was the whole pitching staff stayed healthy.
Oh,
Imagine that?
yeah.
And then went into the postseason, in top form. And in fact, in 2004, there were 2 pitchers who started 33 games and 3 who started 32 games. Talk about consistency. and yeah, Kurt Schilling, I interviewed Kurt Schilling a couple of years ago, and he pointed that out. He said, you look, it's all about the pitch. It really is. Yeah. And then in 2007, I think they had 4 guys who pitched more than 30, and on and on. And it's all about pitching, particularly when you get later and later, because the pitchers get better and better. And you watch the scores of dropping down, because the best pitchers, the best defense are the people who are there. But let me hear from you. What questions do you have? I'm happy to, and I'm going to hang around for a while after we formally adjourn in 10 minutes or so.
I used to listen to them way back in the 40s on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a real Red Sox fan.
Well, I'm glad you said it. I meant to do that at the beginning. I went to my first game in 1952. How many of you went in the 1940s? You got there, Jeff? Right?
Wow.
What year do you recall?
What year did I go?
Yeah, in the 40s.
Oh, probably 46, 47.
It was a good choice. Do you remember what year, Jeff?
45.
45. Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, the last year of long-time baseball. Yeah, interesting. And you were there in the 50s? 40?
Earlier, I used to go with my mother
Yeah.
when they had Ladies' Day.
Oh, yes, yeah, Ladies' Day.
And I was just
Who here remembers Ladies'
I
Day?
do.
That's when I went too.
There was one, I used to like one of the players, and I didn't know who they were. But we were sitting out on the third baseline, I think, and I think we were the only ladies in the field. All of them had their straw hats and their cigars. And so anyway, one guy I liked, I don't know if it was on the Braves or the Red Sox, but
What was the
anyway,
name again?
Sammy Jethro.
Oh, Sam the Jeffro. He was Rookie of the Year.
So I got up and my mother said, "There's Sammy, he's good," but they were over on the other side of the field.
Yeah.
So I'm yelling, "Sammy, Sammy!" And all these guys got up behind me and they're all yelling, "Sammy, Sammy!" But I wasn't in school at that time. Or if I was in kindergarten or something.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
He
But
was.
I'll tell you, I have 7 brothers. So I had no
That was a
choice.
movie, wasn't it? Or
It's a movie, Seven Brothers.
No, 7 brides for 7 brothers. But you can't fight them, join them. I mean, my mother was a big fan of golf,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I think a lot of us probably grew up in Red Sox household. And now and again I'll meet people who talk about the Braves and how much they miss them and how much they were their favorite team. Well, that's great. Sam Jeffro was the oldest player to win the Rookie of the Year. He had played in the Negro Leagues for about 8 years.
yeah, there was something on TV a short while ago. Well, maybe not these last 2 years.
TV,
But it
it
was
started in
something,
like around 1950.
Oh, did it?
Not all of the games, and didn't tell about it very well. But a lot of people don't realize the first Major League Baseball player of color was the Braves' Sammy Jethro in 1950. It wasn't until 9 years later that Pumpsy Green came on. I interviewed Pumpsy. One interesting thing he said, I talked earlier about the Pacific Coast League and how Williams and Pesky, and he said, I didn't have any great ambitions of getting to the All-Star Major League. He said, all I wanted to do was play for the Oakland Oaks. And then I could just live at home. I didn't have to go to spring training. The weather's good out here. And, I'll get a good winter job. And it'll be wonderful. And next thing I know, I'm going to Boston. He was met at the airport by Bill Russell and Casey Jones to help him acclimate.
Yeah.
What other questions?
This is so dumb, I know nothing.
No.
What radio channel are the Sox, or their games broadcast on?
That's not such a bad question at all, because I can't remember the call letters and,
I think it's
what is it,
EEI.
90.3?
Yeah, what number would
EEI,
that?
I think it's 8 or 950, 850 or 9,
Yeah, on the AM, right.
AM.
850.
Right.
850.
Everybody know that?
850.
103.3?
To WHD.
WHCA, wow. That's a memory.
Thanks.
You know, the great
Appreciate it.
memories that come flooding back when we're talking about baseball, but you think about all the other things. That,
You said that they
You
won
think Ortiz
the
should have made
World
the Hall of Fame?
Series
Oh,
from
I think so, he
46.
did.
Or not at 46. They won 4 years in a row.
it's 2004, 7, 13, and 18. Yeah, they lost in 7 games in 46, 67, 75, and 86.
But didn't they then have competitive teams, 47, 48?
Oh yeah, from 46 to 50. When the year started, they were always picked for first or second, but and they were never good enough to beat the Yankees.
My brother said that was when the Yankees Red Sox
Oh, the height of the rivalry.
started.
Yeah,
The
Johnny
rivalry
Pesky told me, 50 years later, he was invited to some big testimonial in New York, and they seated him with 5 former Yankees. He said, I don't know, who in the world did this seating? He sat down. He said, by the end of the night, we're all talking baseball. But 50 years later, he still hated them. You wouldn't see any of those guys hugging one another. No hugging. It's a kind of
Ortiz should have made the Hall
joke.
of Fame?
Ortiz? I wouldn't have voted for him this year, for sure. Yeah, it's a close
I
call.
agree with you.
It's a close call.
How do you
Because the
think,
drugs? Because of the failed the drug test?
Yeah, a combination of things, being the designated hitter.
Part-time
He
player.
plays only half the game. So he's down there watching video to get ready for his next at bat while everybody else is out there in the field.
Hitting in the cage.
Yeah, right. It's a huge advantage. Now, he did so much that you do have to give him a hot look. You have to think of the drug thing is,
Red Sox promoted him.
absolutely.
Yes.
Now
Well-
they're giving 24 Ortiz memorabilias at 24 games. Whether it's a keychain, a bobblehead, or whatever. Too much.
You didn't
Too much.
mention Jerry Remy.
Oh, Jerry Remy, yeah.
Yeah.
The most interesting thing I can tell you about Jerry Remy is he was the quietest ball player I ever interviewed. And I saw him, not the year we were there, but 4 years later. Jack and I went to a fantasy camp where the old players come back. And he was there in 1992. And he was the quietest of the 18 former
he was
Red
a
Sox.
fiery player.
Hey, oh yeah. But I asked him. In fact, Joe Morgan, who was the manager, Morgan Magic, he said he was the quietest ball player I ever managed in my 30 years of managing. But I asked him, and he said, I always remind myself, I'm going into people's living room, family room. I'm going into their house, and when somebody comes to visit me, I don't want them to be show off or too loud or know-it-alls, and I try to remember that. And obviously he did, and it worked very well. And his partners were always able to bring him out, which.
Jerry Remy had such a great sense of humor.
Oh yeah.
Hot dogs.
Yeah. So you know what? I'm going to suggest we formally adjourn, and I'm just going to stay around for another 15 minutes or so. Because some people probably want to.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything. Thanks for listening.